I want to talk about pediatric inflammatory multisystem syndrome, which is associated with SARS-CoV-2, which is actually it is called by numerous names. It is called as pediatric inflammatory multisystem syndrome, pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome, or CAVA COVID-19, or CAVA Shoki, or like there are numerous names. But now, for now, we are taking it as pediatric inflammatory multisystem syndrome, which is associated with SARS-CoV-19. So this SARS-CoV-2 infection, which was associated with the MIS, it is mostly seen in association with MIS in children. Not in adults, but in children, mostly it is associated with multisystem inflammatory syndrome. And in MIS, in children, when we see a few features, they overlap with Kawasaki disease, toxic shock syndrome, secondary HLH, or MAS. The relationship of MIS to SARS-CoV-2 infection suggests that there is a pathogenesis which involves post-infectious immune dysregulation. Because of rapid clinical deterioration which is seen in this disease, it's mostly managed in PICU. And specific immunomodulatory therapy, it depends upon the clinical presentation. And the relationship between the immune response to SARS-CoV-2 vaccines in development and MIS, multisystem inflammatory syndrome, it requires further study, because most of the times what they're seen is like, we have antibody which is coming as positive. So after that, like, is it like, immune dysregulation which is caused by the antibody? So if you are giving vaccines also, there antibodies will be formed. So what will be the effect then? Do you see MIC in patients who are receiving vaccines also? That's a question. But actually, people who have received convalescent plasma, which is containing the antibody, they did not find any side effects because of plasma. So once you see the pathophysiology and pathogenesis, I think that doubt will be cleared. So what is the case definition according? So I am presenting two definitions. There are lots of definitions nowadays because this is a new syndrome. So everybody are writing down definitions about this disease according to their experience. But I'm going to talk about two definitions which is written by RCPCH and CDC. According to RCPCH definition, a child who is presenting with persistent fever and inflammation, so which is seen as neutrophilia, elevated CRP, and lymphopenia. And if there is any evidence of single or multi-organ dysfunction, so if you're having other like CNS involvement, GI involvement, cardiac involvement, respiratory involvement, shock, or any other additional features are seen. And this may include children who are fulfilling full or partial criteria for Kawasaki disease. And you are excluding any other microbial cause as the disease. Like you have done a respiratory wildfire, you've excluded all the other organisms, you've done a culture, so that has come to be negative. You've excluded bacterial sepsis, staphylococcal or streptococcal shock syndrome, and you have excluded infections which are associated with myocarditis, such as enterovirus. And you've done a SARS-CoV-2 PCR testing, it can be positive or negative. So RT2 SARS-CoV-2 PCR, it can be positive in MIS patients also. So all stable children should be discussed as soon as possible with specialist services to ensure prompt treatment, like with the infectious specialist, cardiologist, and rheumatologist. There should be a low threshold for referral to PICU. So what are the clinical features? There are some clinical features, some lab features, some ECG and echo features which are seen in all these children. Clinical, all these patients will have a persistent fever more than 38.5 degrees centigrade. Most of them will have oxygen requirement, hypotension, and some of them will have 15 of these features. That can be abdominal pain, confusion, conjunctivitis, cough, diarrhea, headache, lymphadenopathy, mucous membrane changes, neck swelling, rash, respiratory symptoms, sore throat, swollen hands and feet, syncope, and vomiting. So what are the imaging we do? We do echo, ECG, chest X-ray, abdominal ultrasound, CT chest with contrast and view. So what do we see in echo and ECG? You see features of myocarditis, valvulitis, pericardial effusion, coronary artery dilatation. Chest X-ray you see for patchy symmetrical infiltrates and pleural effusion. On abdominal ultrasound, you see for colitis, ileitis, lymphadenopathy is there, mesenteric lymphadenopathy, ascites, hepatosplenomegaly. So if you are like, if you're thinking some coronary artery distal coronary artery abnormalities are seen on, when you're suspecting them, but you're not able to confirm with 2D echo, then you go ahead and do CT test with contrast. Okay. In lab, all of them will have abnormal fibrinogen, absence of potential causative organisms other than SARS-CoV-2. They will have high CRP, high D dimers, high ferritin, hypoalbuminemia, lymphopenia, and most of them will have high neutrophil count. Some of them can have normal neutrophils also. In some, you have AKI, anemia, coagulopathy, high IL-10, high IL-6 if available, neutrophilia, proteinuria, raised CPK, raised LDH, raised triglycerides, raised troponin, decreased platelets, and transaminitis is seen. And these assays are not widely available. Like in few places, you don't get to do IL-6 levels and TNF alpha levels and IL-1 levels. So there, what you can do is CRP can be used as a surrogate marker for IL-6. So according to CDC, the case definition is fever more than 24 hours reported or documented, like if it has to be more than 24 hours, more than 38 degrees centigrade. Lab evidence of inflammation has to be there. And illness which is requiring hospitalization. So you will have a multisystem involvement, 2 or more than 2 organ involvement. And there must not be any other plausible diagnosis. And you have to have COVID-19 positivity or history of any exposure to COVID-19. And SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR positivity currently or recently positive on antibody testing. Or COVID-19 exposure within the 4 weeks prior to the onset of symptoms. You have to include one or more of the following lab value abnormalities. They will have decreased lymphocytes, decreased albumin, elevation in any of the following: neutrophil count, CRP, ESR, fibrinogen, procal, D-dimer, ferritin, LDH, or IL-6. So this is the, like you can see lots of clinical features in this diagram. So you have fever, myalgia, that are the their symptoms. So they can present with red eyes, like a conjunctivitis without any discharge. They can have a maculopapular rash. They can have lymphadenopathy, mostly unilateral, like as seen in KD. Stomatitis can be seen, cheilitis, extremity swelling can be seen, like mostly dorsal portion of the extremities. They might be swelling on the dorsal portion of the extremities with erythema. Skin peeling can be seen. They can complain about GI symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. They can have headache, meningismus, lethargy, confusion, and other things like, and lab parameters. If they can have myocarditis features like in the form of increased troponin, increased NT-proBNP. On 2D, you can see coronary aneurysms. Like they can present with hypotension, hypoperfusion, tachycardia. Hypoxemia can be seen, pulmonary infiltrates can be seen, chest pain. They can complain of chest pain. And hyponatremia and renal failure also can be seen. So mostly this is not this. There must be some lab evidence of current or past infection with SARS-CoV-2. Okay, and there will be high ESR, CRP, ferritin, LDH, IL-6, fibrinogen, procal, and D dimers as discussed. So most of the clinical features at the onset of PIMS are fever, rash, stomachache, eye irritation, swollen lymph nodes, and tongue. So this is the same thing which I've explained. You can see a hive-like skin rash which is seen. And you can see enlarged gland lymph node on one side of the neck. You can have red or pink eyes or conjunctivitis. That is because of dilated blood vessels which is causing this symptom. And you can see strawberry tongue as you see in KD. Okay, they can complain of abdominal pain, diarrhea, vomiting, and fever lasting for several days, 100 or more. And you can have swollen hands and feet. And they can be red hands and feet also. So what are those, 100% they will have fever more than 4 days, okay, which is followed by conjunctivitis, followed by red and cracked lips. And you will have GI signs in 81% of them. And you have diffuse skin rash in 81%. And 68% have hands and feet edema, redness at palms and soles. And coronary dilatation is seen in 19%, 14% in severe forms, pericarditis 24%, 14% in severe forms, and myocarditis 44%, 86% in severe forms. Okay, so the least symptom which is seen is respiratory signs. Only 12% will have respiratory signs. So how is it different from Kawasaki disease? So Kawasaki disease and COVID MIS, multi-system inflammatory disorder, main thing is like, they are having a similar inflammatory features, but the antigen which is causing Kawasaki disease and the antigen which is causing MIS is different. And the genetic people who are genetically predisposed to Kawasaki disease are different from people who are genetically predisposed to MIS. So they don't have that similarities. Only the inflammatory part is similar. Both of the inflammatory part of the disease is similar in both Kawasaki disease and MIS. So how do you differentiate that? So like, you know, the age group who are presenting as MIS, they have a wider age group. Mostly Kawasaki disease is seen between 2 to 5 years. Over here, you will see elder children who are presenting with Kawasaki disease. We have seen 13 months old child also who are presenting with the MIS, and 13 years old child who is presenting with MIS, and 13 months old child presenting with MIS. So in both the frequency and severity of myocarditis is strikingly different from classical Kawasaki disease. And third, abdominal pain or diarrhea were more frequently reported than in classical KD. 1 out of 3 patients will have this symptom. Finally, the cytokine storm, which is reflected clinically by heart failure, pneumonia, GIT, neurological and renal features are associated with elevated CRP, increased ferritin, increased cytokines, was more common in pediatric inflammatory multisystem disorder syndrome. In contrast to severe adult COVID-19, our patients, they rarely demonstrated respiratory features, suggesting a different underlying host immune response in children. So in such cases, classical clinical signs must be of the KD should be carefully searched for, as well as asymptomatic, as well as digestive symptoms and respiratory features also have to be seen. Some investigation should be systematically performed on an urgent basis in order to diagnose life-threatening complications. So you have to search what are the life-threatening complications you anticipate in these children. So myocarditis, features of MAS, and renal impairment. How do you exclude them? Like myocarditis, you have to keep looking for troponin, NT-proBNP, and ECG. And for looking for features of MAS, you have to look for WBC cells, fibrinogen, ferritin, and albumin levels. And if how do you look for renal impairment? You have to look for creatinine, urea, and you have to exclude proteinuria. Clinicians should be particularly cautious with patients more than 5 years who are demonstrating elevated ferritin levels, that is more than 1400, because of the risk of rapidly progressive CAVA COVID-19 and heart failure. Patients should undergo SARS-CoV-2 testing by RT-PCR, at least in nasopharyngeal secretions and stool, and SARS-CoV-2 serology should also be undertaken. MIS and KD may share overlapping clinical features. What are the clinical features which overlap? They are conjunctival injection, oropharyngeal findings such as red or cracked lips, strawberry tongue, rash, swollen or erythematous hands and feet, and cervical lymphadenopathy. Patients with MIS encompass a broader age range, have more prominent GI and neurological symptoms. They present more frequently in shock. They are more likely to display cardiac dysfunction in the form of arrhythmias and ventricular dysfunction than children with KD. And at presentation, patients with MIS, they tend to have a lower platelet count, less albumin levels, decreased lymphocyte counts, higher CRP levels than patients with KD. MIS patients without KD features can develop coronary artery abnormalities also. So what is the pathophysiology? Like what is the cause? Like, I mean, how is it causing? How SARS-CoV-2 is related to this MIS. So mostly, like, you know, during the lockdown phase, there is a peak of infection in the because of lockdown. So we see parents who presented with COVID-19 infection. In the same family, the children after 4 weeks, they are presenting with MIS. So they had an exposure 4 weeks before the infection. Okay, so that is a definite history. So onset of the disease 2 to 4 weeks after acute SARS-CoV-2 infection or exposure. So SARS-CoV-2 acts as a trigger of post-infectious inflammatory disease. A post-infectious process with delayed immune activation leading to a cytokine burst, which is responsible for fever, skin rash, cardiac failure, and major inflammatory syndrome seems likely similar to the presumed pathophysiology of classical KD. So this picture is self-explanatory. So if you are having in some patients who are presenting with mild disease, they have, like, you know, they had an exposure, there is a viral load. According to the viral load, according to the genetic predisposition, the interferon response is according to the time. Okay, So according to the interferon response, the virus is removed from the body. So there is no cytokine storm. The IL-6, which was increased at one point, decreased. The chemokines and cytokines have decreased. And IgG antibody, it raised, and after the viral load has come, it has come to a plateau phase. Okay. So in few children who are presenting with severe disease, including MIS, what happens over here? So there is a viral load. Okay. So there is increased viral load. The virus which is present in the body, it is not removed by the immune system. So they have some delayed immune response in these children. Okay. So there are some genetically predisposed children who are not able to remove the virus in time. So in these children, you have a delayed interferon response. Because of the delayed interferon response, the cytokine storm which is present, so that there is a peak of all these cytokines, okay, which are causing all the symptoms of MIS. But IgG antibody is present over here also. It is present in mild disease also, as well as in severe disease. So IgG antibody is not a culprit. It's just you are just finding out that the child was exposed to the disease. Okay. So if you do the test over here, so there is a delayed interferon response, there is a slow viral clearance, and there is more inflammation. That is what is causing severe disease. So if you do the child might present to you during this phase where there is peak of this cytokines. Okay. So you're seeing the patient over here and you doing a RT-PCR over here. The viral load is decreasing when there is an increased IL-6. Okay. So maybe you are seeing the child over here. If you see the child over here in this phase, you get a RT-PCR positivity plus MIS. If you see the child in this part of the phase, like after this has come down, then you will have RT-PCR negativity with IgG antibody positivity. And like even though sometimes, even though child is positive, your test will not be 100% sensitive. Okay. Sometimes the child might be carrying the viral load and your test might come negative. Okay. So this is what is happening. So the timing of the interferon response to the SARS-CoV-2 infection can vary with viral load and genetic differences in host response. When viral load is low, interferon responses are engaged and contribute to viral clearance, resulting in mild infection. When viral load is high or genetic factors show slow antiviral responses, viral replication can delay the interferon responses, and cytokine storm can result before adaptive responses will clear the virus, resulting in severe disease, including MIS. And MIS is not because of acute viral infection, but it is because of post-infectious phenomena related to IgG antibody-mediated enhancement of disease. So I want to explain this sentence. This hypothesis seems to have emerged for two main reasons. So MIS cases have lagged in time compared with the peak of SARS-CoV-2 infection in at least some countries. However, as children likely acquire the virus from their parents because of stay-at-home restrictions, a lag from the peak of cases in adults are present. Second, children with MIS more often test positive for antibody to SARS-CoV-2 than for virus using nasopharyngeal RT-PCR. But 5 out of 8 children who presented with MIS, they are testing negative for antibody as well. Children with MIS have predominantly GI presentation and very less respiratory symptoms. Therefore, the virus may be primarily replicating in the GI tract and enterocytes and have been shown to be readily infected by SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 epithelial damage at an early stage that will cause secondary local endotheliitis, which may explain a delayed autoinflammatory vasculitic phenotype, which is presenting with upregulation of interleukin-1 beta or IL-6. So there is a SARS-CoV-2 infection of the enterocytes causing epithelial damage, leading to secondary local endotheliitis, later on presenting as vasculitis, which presents as your abdominal pain and other diarrhea, vomiting. Because MIS generally occurs late after SARS-CoV-2, after antibodies have developed, aberrant cellular or humoral adaptive immune responses may also be involved. There is evidence that antibodies may increase the severity of SARS-CoV-1 infection by triggering inflammation or mediating organ damage. Furthermore, genetic studies hint that children who are carrying variants in genes that regulate T and B cell responses, or they have defect in clearance of immune complexes, they are at higher risk for MIS because of aberrant T or B cell responses to SARS-CoV-2. So what is the pathogenesis? So you have three phases: early infection phase, that is asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic in children. And second is a pulmonary phase, which is severe in adults, but it's mild or absent in many children. And the early infection appears to trigger macrophage activation, that is early infection phase 1. That will go and trigger your macrophage activation, which is followed by the stimulation of T helper cells. This in turn will lead to your cytokine release, the stimulation of macrophages, neutrophils and monocytes, along with B cell and plasma cell activation, with the production of antibodies leading to hyperimmune response, which is your stage 3. This immune dysregulation is associated with the inflammatory syndrome in affected children, and direct infection with SARS-CoV-2 is less likely to play a role in MIS. This figure is self-explanatory. Stage 1, early infection. Your SARS-CoV-2 infection, asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic patients, so they are having this virus in the nasopharyngeal secretions, and that will present as mild infection. And stage 2, pulmonary phase, is completely skipped in children because of lack of ACE2 inhibitors and other factors which are absent in children. That's why they don't have a pulmonary infection. So directly these antigens which are present, this virus which is present in the body, they will go and activate macrophages that will activate helper T cells and cause cytokine release and storm. And that will stimulate your macrophages, neutrophils, and monocytes, causing hyperimmune response. The second one is the helper T cells. Again, they will go and stimulate B cells, causing the release of antibodies. So that is what is causing hyperimmune response this hyperimmune response in a genetically predisposed child will cause multisystem inflammatory syndrome, but direct viral injury is unlikely. Okay, so you can actually ask me, how are the antibodies so the helper T cells are stimulating B cells. Before that, there is a cytokine storm already, and these antibodies are causing hyperimmune response. The cytokines again are also causing hyperimmune response. Okay, so if antibodies are already there, so they have to protect the child. Okay, so how is it causing infection? So it is all because of the cytokines which are released during the process of clearance of virus is causing the disease. So there is a dysregulated immune response, which we have seen in earlier slide. I want to go back over here. So there is a virus. If in time, if there is a good interferon response in time, in a genetically a well child who does not have a delayed immune response, so the virus must have been removed like this. But over here, there is an increased interferon response. There is a lagged interferon response. So there is a delay in interferon response. So because of which the virus starts replicating, and this virus will cause increased cytokines over here. So you are catching the child in cytokine storm over here. Okay. So in time, because of this delayed interferon response, and once the interferon response is adequate, the virus gets cleared from the body. But this hyperinflammatory response, which is caused by the delayed interferon response, is present. It will take a longer time to come down, and it will cause lots of complications. These cytokines will go and harm all the organs in the body. They will cause refractory vasodilatory shock. They will cause myocarditis. They will cause systolic dysfunction in the heart. It can affect the brain. It could cause confusion. Okay, they can cause acute kidney injury. Hyperalbuminemia is seen. Hyponatremia is seen in these children. Okay. So children appear to have less severe pulmonary manifestations compared to adults, possibly due to lower gene expression of the ACE2 receptor. I've already talked about it. And immune dysregulation in adults with respiratory disease is characterized by lymphopenia, specifically NK cells, CD4 T lymphocytes, and B lymphocytes, and sustained production of pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF alpha and interleukin 6. This immune dysregulation has been the basis of immunomodulatory therapies for adults with severe SARS-CoV-2 infections, such as tocilizumab, which is an antibody against the IL-6 receptor. In KD, a systemic hyperinflammatory state is characterized by elevated TNF. I mean, what is the similarity? In KD, you have increased TNF, increased IL-6, increased IL-1 beta, increased IL-17, and GCSF. Okay, so initially I told you in KD and MI, a multisystem inflammatory syndrome, you have similar inflammatory state, but different antigens and different genetic predisposition. Okay, so we speculate that MIS is a delayed immunological phenomenon associated with inflammation stage, that is stage 3 hyperinflammation phase, following either symptomatic or asymptomatic COVID-19 infection. So one key finding in standard KD is the role played by PGE2. All KD patients have increased plasma PGE2 concentrations. These levels were higher in patients who are resistant to IVIG treatment than they were in patients who responded to IVIG treatment. This is something new. 3 weeks post IVIG treatment, the responders foster PGE2 were back to pre-treatment levels, whereas the non-responders remain as high as they were just after less than 3 days treatment. So if you check PGE2 levels in a person who's not responding to first dose of IVIG, and if you check it before IVIG and after IVIG, the PGE2 levels will remain the same. It is shown that IVIG stimulates in a dose-dependent manner PGE2 in blood monocytes. Both IVIG and PGE2 inhibit CD40 ligand on CD4 T cells, which may contribute to the therapeutic anti-inflammatory effect of IVIG in this disease. This is important because CD40 ligand levels on CD4 T cells are higher in KD patients than in controls with other sources of fever, and these levels decrease 3 days after completing IVIG therapy. Moreover, CD40 ligand levels on CD4 T cells seem to indicate whether coronary artery disease will be seen or not. So this is actually research purpose. We cannot do CD4 ligand levels on all children. So what are the initial considerations when you see a child in the emergency? It is very important if the child is presenting with fever, have a low index of suspicion for MIS, because in this season, with COVID-19 in picture, so if they have some features of MIS, go and get CBC, CRP, SARS-CoV-2 PCR, and antibody test. If they have if patients fulfill fully the case definition criteria for MIS, then you have to undergo more extensive, they have to undergo more extensive workup. Most of the patients are initially well appearing with reassuring lab workup, only to return to the hospitals days later with worsening symptoms and rapid clinical deterioration. Most of them need PICU care. We propose that patients who are evaluated for this condition, who are discharged from the emergency department, are given MIS specific discharge instructions, and they have a follow-up clinic. I mean, they have to come to the follow-up clinic, or else you have to follow up them on phone 24 hours to 72 hours later. So what are the criteria for hospitalization? Children who are initially being evaluated in a rural area or ED or hospital, first you stabilize them, transfer them quickly and safely to a tertiary medical center. So if the beds are not available in the PICU, you keep in a place where it has to be near to the PICU. Inform the PICU people, they can shift the child anytime the child might need PICU care. Okay. So you have to do set-1 studies like COVID-19 PCR, respiratory viral panel to exclude other infections, ECG, Procal, ESR, urine routine, blood culture, and urine culture. You have to do CBC with differential serum albumin and LFT, CRP, D-dimer, troponin, BNP, LDH, VVG, lactate, PT, APGT, fibrinogen, and CPK. So second set of studies are chest X-ray, echocardiogram, triglycerides, antithrombin 3, Adams 13. You have to do blood type and screen, and rapid strep and throat culture and ASO to exclude other infections. You can collect some blood for getting some specific viral titers to exclude other infections, or collect large volumes, 5 to 10 ml, serum to store for future studies if you want to do other studies. And you can send for cytokine panel, von Willebrand panel, and get an IgA immunoglobulin level, particularly if your center uses IVIG, known to have significant IgA contamination. For children that fall into the case definition, a multidisciplinary team approach is necessary to decide ongoing care, as the disease manifestations can be significantly different. It is not a cardiology problem, it is not an infectious problem. It is like, you need a multidisciplinary team to manage this patient. Okay, so like once you receive the patient in the critical care, intensivist has seen the patient, first thing is the child presents mostly with resistant vasodilatory shock. So you have to be very careful with the fluids you're giving. Okay, so slowly you give fluids and see the response, and you have to check for Krebs, you have to check for hepatomegaly, and if you have an ultrasound, check for B lines on the ultrasound. Okay, so along with that, like, and if the child does not respond to fluids, you have to start inotropes very early, and child might need mechanical ventilation because you want to decrease oxygen consumption and give adequate oxygen supply for the child. So early recognition of shock state vasoplegic with cardiogenic, proper and judicious fluid resuscitation. You have to do early establishment of invasive monitoring, like, start pulse ox monitoring, arterial monitoring of the blood pressure. Mostly these children have hypotension. Intubate and mechanically ventilate the child to optimize the oxygen delivery and minimize oxygen consumption. Appropriate initiation of inotropes and vasopressors are key factors to successful and favorable outcome. This initial approach, which is, and along with multidisciplinary management and initiation of early but comprehensive diagnostics, help to guide further therapeutic choices in the form of antithrombotics, antibiotics, and immunomodulators. Extracorporeal therapies like plasmapheresis, therapeutic plasma exchange, and extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, such as ECMO, may have a role in treating and supporting these patients, especially in cases of severe cytokine storm, refractory vasoplegia, and cardiogenic or septic shock. The recent report from Switzerland and France supports such an approach. So they describe the experiences in 35 critically ill children with MIS presenting with acute myocardial injury or myocarditis and cardiogenic shock. Initial symptoms and presentation were mainly fever, fatigue, and GI manifestations. Inotropic support was required in 80%, while VA ECMO was initiated in 28%. Despite the rapid deterioration at presentation, a rapid resolution of the systolic myocardial function was noted. All patients survived, none had embolic or thrombotic events. All patients received IVIG and 65% received heparin for anticoagulation. In children presenting with shock, that is who are reported with vasodilatory shock, fluid resuscitation is imperative in the initial management. As there is high potential for underlying cardiac dysfunction, patients should be frequently reassessed during fluid resuscitation for evidence of fluid overload such as pulmonary edema or hepatomegaly. If you are having a bedside ultrasound, you evaluate for cardiac function early in resuscitation to determine best management. Complete transthoracic echocardiogram should be performed urgently in all patients with clinical or lab evidence of cardiac injury or shock. In children with reassuring initial cardiac evaluation or mild to moderate disease, it is reasonable to consider ongoing cardiac screening throughout hospitalization due to reports of rapid decompensation. So consider repeating echo with any significant lab changes or clinical changes. If you find the child is deteriorating clinically, if you're finding increasing trend of lab markers, you go ahead and repeat echocardiogram. So just because the initial echocardiogram is normal doesn't mean that you can sit on it and not repeat an echo, because the disease can progress very fast. So what is the consensus for cardiac imaging strategy? So critically ill shock patients, you get an ECG and echo on admission. Daily you do echo and ECG for critically ill or shock patient, daily troponin, NT-proBNP, and do daily inflammatory markers. If stable or non-PICU, echo and ECG every 2 to 3 days, and you have to see the trend of biomarkers. Echo conducted at diagnosis and then during clinical follow-up should include evaluation of what do you see on echo? You have to see the ventricular function, you have to see valvular function, you have to look for pericardial effusion, and you have to do Z scores. And echo should be repeated every 7 days, 14 days, and 4 to 6 weeks after presentation, because mostly this coronary dilatation, the maximum dilatation is seen at 7 days after fever. And after accurate treatment, if you have given correct treatment, at 14 days, there are some studies which are showing decrease in coronary artery diameter also at 14 days. So patients with MIS and abnormal BNP or TROP-T at diagnosis should have these lab parameters trended over time until they normalize. ECG should be performed at a minimum of every 48 hours in MIS patients who are hospitalized and during follow-up visits. If conduction abnormalities are present, patients should be placed on continuous telemetry while in the hospital, and Holter monitor should be considered during follow-up. For those patients who are having cardiac abnormalities occurring in the acute phase of illness, an echo 1 year after MIC should be considered. Patients with LV dysfunction or cardiac artery abnormalities will require more frequent echocardiograms. Cardiac MRI may be indicated 2 to 6 months after MIC in patients who presented with significant transient LV dysfunction in the acute phase of illness, like who are having LV ejection fraction less than 50% or persistent LV dysfunction. Cardiac MRI, what you are going to see, you have to see for functional assessment, T1, T2 weighted images on T1 mapping and extracellular volume quantification and late gadolinium enhancement. Cardiac CT should be performed in patients with suspicion of distal cardiac artery abnormalities that are not well seen on echo. So how do you give cardiac prognosis in MIC? Cardiac follow-up is needed. You do ECG and echo at diagnosis. You repeat at 1 to 2 weeks. And if it is clinically indicated, you have to do it earlier. And again, ECG echo at 4 to 6 weeks. Longer term follow-up in all or just those with cardiac manifestations is still a question. When to do a cardiac MRI, and there's some cardiac issues like ventricular dysfunction, or coronary artery dilatation or enlargement, rhythm disturbances, or heart block, you can do cardiac MRI there. Antibiotic coverage should be empiric in patients diagnosed and hospitalized with MIC, with initial broad spectrum antibiotics recommended as symptoms overlap with severe bacterial infections. If they have milder illness, we suggest ceftriaxone. If GI symptoms are predominant, add metronidazole. In cases of severe illness or shock, we advise vancomycin, clindamycin, cefepime, meropenem, and gentamicin. So once cultures are negative, antibiotics to be discontinued. You can add antivirals if there is access to remdesivir. So if your RT-PCR has come as positive, like child is still having viral load, like you have taught the child before the viral load has been removed from the body, then you have to add remdesivir, which is an antiviral agent with the activity against SARS-CoV-2, particularly for those PCR positive or with the presentation consistent with typical COVID-19 infection. So you load them with 5 mg per kg, maximum 200 mg dose on day 1, then 2.5 mg per kg, 100 mg maximum dose IV daily for 9 days. Children presenting predominantly with shock benefit from cardiac and respiratory support. A number of adjunct therapies have been used because of the profound inflammatory response and KD-like features, with IVIG, corticosteroids, anakinra, and IL-1 receptor antagonist, and tocilizumab and IL-6 receptor monoclonal antibody being most often reported. So if it's a severe disease, we recommend giving IVIG 2 gram per kg and aspirin 20 to 25 mg per kg per dose every 6th hourly, 80 to 100 mg per kg per day for all patients with KD-like illness and evidence of excessive inflammation, ferritin more than 700, CRP more than 30, or multisystem organ failure or cardiac involvement. Aspirin dosage may also vary at individual centers. We decrease aspirin dose to 3 to 5 mg per kg as single daily dose when febrile for 24 hours or more, which will continue after discharge. Patients with KD-like illness in high-risk categories, like if it's infants, KD shock syndrome, CRP more than 130, admission echo is more than 2.5, or if you have seen aneurysms, Asian race, should receive IVIG 2 gram per kg as single infusion with a 3-day pulse methylprednisolone. Child who is presenting with KD symptoms should be reassessed 24 to 36 hours after the end of IVIG infusion, and if they're having evidence of fevers, of ongoing inflammation, you have to check. You have given IVIG. After 24 to 36 hours, check if they are having fevers, still having fever, if there is still signs of ongoing inflammation. So what will you do if it is? You have to give retreatment with IVIG, or you have to start a new therapy by consulting infectious disease specialist and rheumatologist. If there is failure of first-line treatment, if the presentation is most consistent with KD and there is failure of first-line treatment, give a second dose of IVIG or infliximab. You have to consider both of them, any one of them. Cytokine storm syndrome, if they have severe inflammation with or without KD features, for these patients, we would consider use of anakinra and corticosteroids, in particular if they're not responding to supportive care or first-line treatments. Anakinra is having a very short half-life and quick onset. Therefore, if the patient does not respond quickly, other medications can be considered. So there are few studies which are actually voting for anakinra. There are few studies which are voting for tocilizumab. So serial lab testing and cardiac assessment should guide immunomodulatory treatment response and tapering. Patients will often require a 2 to 3 week taper of immunomodulatory medications. So when do you use anticoagulation? So if there is any evidence of hypercoagulable state, like you are having increased D-dimers, increased fibrinogen, and TEG findings are suggestive of activated platelets, high clot strength, and mostly in adult studies in SARS-CoV-19, you're having thrombosis. So mostly you start using anticoagulants. So if you're having less than 80,000, don't give aspirin. And if you're having coronary artery abnormalities with Z-score 2.5 to 10, you have to treat with low dose aspirin. And how long? Indefinite. Patients with Z-score of more than 10, you have to treat with low dose aspirin and therapeutic anticoagulation with enoxaparin or warfarin. If you're having LV dysfunction with ejection fraction less than 40% or non-thrombosis, you have to give aspirin plus therapeutic anticoagulation. And what are the indications for longer OPD therapeutic enoxaparin, like therapeutic enoxaparin? So if you're having a Z-score more than 10, indefinite treatment. If you're having a documented thrombosis, you treat for more than 3 months pending thrombus resolution. Or if there is an ongoing moderate to severe LV dysfunction, you have to continue OPD therapeutic enoxaparin. Okay. So in this slide, if the child is presenting with multisystem hyperinflammatory syndrome after 2 to 4 weeks of COVID-19, and you are checked for red flag signs, high grade fever more than 102, vomiting, pain in abdomen, rash with the risk factors like obesity and asthma, then you have to look along with these features. Is the child presenting like Kawasaki-like syndrome, or is the child presenting like TSS-like syndrome with the classical multisystem hyperinflammatory syndrome in children, or COVID-19 associated febrile inflammatory state. So you have to check for these, and then dependingly, if it is Kawasaki-like and there is no shock, no coronary dilatation, give 2 gram per kg over 12 to 24 hours IVIG. Aspirin high dose 12.5 mg per kg per dose 4 times a day, maximum 4 grams per day. Decrease the dose to 3 to 5 mg per kg per day after resolution of fever for 48 hours. If the child is having shock, multisystem involvement, coronary abnormality, give IVIG 2 gram per kg over 12 to 24 hours plus methylpred to 2 mg per kg to 10 mg per kg per day. Aspirin low dose and add anticoagulant if the Z-score more than 10. So child is presenting with TSS or classical multisystem hyperinflammatory syndrome in children. And if the child is having vasoplegic shock and it is fluid refractory, start vasopressors early. Like, if you don't have a central line, give a diluted double dilution by peripheral line. Insert a central line and give IVIG 2 gram per kg per day with or without methylprednisolone 10 to 30 mg per kg for 3 days over 30 minutes. And start low molecular weight heparin 1 mg per kg. Okay. So if there are signs of LV dysfunction, 50% of them, in 50% you see signs of LV dysfunction, you have narrow pulse pressure, vasoconstriction, there is echo evidence of LV dysfunction, and troponin is more than 50, high proBNP, cardiomegaly, and ECG is also suggestive, and add or start epinephrine, dopamine, milrinone, early NIV and HFN or HFNC. Give IVIG 1 gram per kg slowly. Because of LV dysfunction, you cannot give more fluids with or without methylprednisolone pulse, and along with that low molecular weight heparin 1 mg per kg. And if their child is IVIG and steroid resistant, go for anakinra or tocilizumab or infliximab. So this is the same picture, same thing which is explained in one chart. Okay. So if you are using steroids, this is the dose, 10 mg per kg to 30 mg per kg for 1 to 3 days, followed by 2 mg per kg per day. Tocilizumab, in severe presentation of fever more than 24 hours post steroids or IVIG, then less than 30 kgs you give 12 mg per kg, more than 30 kgs 8 mg per kg. You can repeat the dose in more than 12 hours in patients who remain febrile within 24 hours of initial dose. They are higher risk of bacterial and fungal infections, and you have to check for LFT. Children who are on tocilizumab, you have to check to LFT and check for triglycerides regularly. And people who are on tocilizumab, anakinra, or infliximab, you're not supposed to give any live vaccines to these children. Anakinra, in severe MIS, if fever is persisting more than 24 hours post steroids and IVIG, you have to initiate anakinra before invasive mechanical ventilation. That is more beneficial. It should be considered as drug of choice in refractory MIS. Less than 20 kgs, give 2 mg per kg start loading dose followed by continuous infusion of 2 mg per kg per day. The best part is it's having a very short action. So if it is not working, you can go for another biological. You have to increase the dose by 2 mg per kg per day every 12 hours if unresponsive. Maximum dose is 12 mg per kg per day, 400 mg excluding loading dose. So you have to check for anaphylaxis, if there is any neutropenia. These are all the side effects which you have to check. Eosinophilia, transaminitis, immunosuppression. You have to monitor palliative when the child is on NFA. IVIG 2 gram per kg maximum, 100 grams over 24 hours. 1 gram per kg if cardiac dysfunction is suspected, as these patients do not tolerate large amount of fluid. Plasmapheresis in thrombocytopenia associated multi-organ failure, severe cytokine storm, refractory vasoplasia, cardiogenic shock, septic shock, you use plasmapheresis. VA ECMO is used in ARDS, cardiac failure, like in presenting with myocarditis, arrhythmias, pulmonary embolism. If the child is having refractory vasoplasia, cardiogenic or septic shock, if all the other conventional treatments fail, then you have to go for VA ECMO. So the same thing, hospital course, we have already gone through it. This will vary depending upon the initial presentation. We recommend a daily lab evaluation be done on all the hospitalized children depending upon the disease classification. We advise stopping antibiotics if cultures are negative after 48 hours. Children who are presenting with KD symptoms should be reassessed 24 to 36 hours after the end of IVIG infusion for evidence of fever or ongoing inflammation. If clinical inflammation continues or worsens, retreatment or new therapy should be considered, which is guided by either infectious specialist or rheumatologist. Typically, we decrease aspirin dose to 3 to 5 mg per kg as a single daily dose when febrile for 24 hours or more, which will continue after discharge. So what are the discharge criteria and follow? Clinical criteria, child is eating and drinking adequately, heart failure symptoms have been controlled with medications, 48 hours, no oxygen, 48 hours, no fever, 48 hours, like off vasopressors. Echocardiogram stable or improved, ventricular function has improved, coronary artery abnormalities, they have improved, and valve function is whatever disability is there, it has improved. Lab parameters, 3 to 4 days of downtrending inflammatory markers, ferritin, CRP, dimer have come down. Troponin consistently declining and less than 1 ng per ml. How do you do repeat echo? Like how frequently you do? Initially, if the child is, if echo is normal, you do it 1 to 2 weeks and then 4 to 6 weeks. If it is initially abnormal with the Z score more than 2.5, repeat every 2 to 3 days until CA aneurysms become stable. Then weekly until discharge. Steroid use and tapering. For mild cases, consider methylpred 2 mg per kg per day, max of 40 to 60 mg per day, then taper over 2 to 3 weeks. For moderate cases, consider MPS 10 mg per kg for 1 day, followed by 2 mg per kg per day with 2 to 3 weeks taper. For severe cases, consider methylpred 20 to 30 mg per kg per day for 1 to 3 days, then 2 mg per kg per day, and taper over 6 to 8 weeks. High dose aspirin till the child is febrile for 24 hours, then shift to low dose aspirin. On follow-up, continue for 4 to 6 weeks after normal echo. You have seen an echo. After normal echo, you have to continue for 4 to 6 weeks. Low molecular weight heparin, continue for 2 weeks after normal echo. Indications for longer OPD therapeutic enoxaparin is Z-score more than 10, indefinitely you have to continue. If there is a documented thrombosis, 3 or more than 3 months pending thrombus resolution. Ongoing moderate or to severe LV dysfunction, you have to give. The limited reports available indicate that children with COVID-19 associated MIS can deteriorate quickly. So increased index of suspicion and discussion regarding higher level of care transferring to pediatric tertiary care centers or to ICU are warranted early. As outlined, a broad initial approach with a multidisciplinary team for those meeting the case definition is crucial for successful outcomes. Thank you.